Emergence of terrorism in the modern political history. The term terrorist first became popular during the French Revolution. Use of the word terrorism began in 1795 in reference to the Reign of Terror initiated by the revolutionary government, during which agents of the Committee of Public Safety and the National Convention were referred to as resistance to the revolutionists. The widespread use of the guillotine is an infamous reminder of the revolutionary violence. Urban mobs demanded blood, and many government officials and aristocrats were beheaded in gruesome public spectacles. From the fall of the Bastille on July 14, 1889, until July 1794, thousands suspected of counter-revolutionary activity were killed on the guillotine. Here again, the relative nature of political crime is documented. Most victims of the French Reign of Terror were revolutionaries who had been denounced by rival factions, whereas thousands of the hated nobility lived in relative tranquility. The end of the terror was signaled by the death of its prime mover, Maximilien Robespierre, on July 25, 1794, as the result of a successful plot to end his rule. He was executed on the same guillotine to which he had sent almost 20,000 people. In the 100 years following the French Revolution, terrorism continued to be a political tool around the world. Terrorism in its modern types. Historically, terrorism was mostly associated with revolutionary movements seeking to overthrow political regimes. As the establishment of nation-states took on a more permanent hold, nationalist terrorism increased to secure the rights of specific ethnically defined minority groups, such as the Irish in the United Kingdom, the Basques in Spain, and Zionists in the former British Mandate of Palestine. In recent times, religious terrorism has proportionally increased the most, especially on an international level. The most conspicuous examples are ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which are held responsible for the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on September 11, 2001. Number 1. Revolutionary terrorists. Revolutionary terrorists use violence to frighten those in power and their supporters in order to replace the existing government with a regime that holds acceptable political or religious views. Terrorist actions such as kidnapping, assassination, and bombing are designed to draw repressive responses from governments trying to defend themselves. 2. Political terrorists. Political terrorism is directed at people or groups who oppose the terrorists' political ideology or whom the terrorists define as outsiders who must be destroyed. Political terrorists may not want to replace the existing government, but to shape it so that it accepts the terrorists' views. Some subtypes of political terrorists include A. Right-wing political terrorism, B. Left-wing political terrorism, C. Eco-terrorism. 3. Nationalist terrorism. Nationalist terrorism promotes the interests of a minority ethnic or religious group that believes it has been persecuted under majority rule and wishes to carve out its own independent homeland. 4. Religious terrorism. Some religious groups engage in terrorism to impose their social and religious code on others. They do not wish to set up their own homeland or topple a government. 5. State-sponsored terrorism. State-sponsored terrorism occurs when a repressive government regime forces its citizens into obedience, oppresses minorities, and stifles political dissent. Death squads and the use of government troops to destroy political opposition parties are often associated with political terrorism. Number 6. Cult terrorism. Some cults may be classified as cult terror groups because their leaders demand that followers prove their loyalty through violence or intimidation. These destructive cults are willing to have members commit violence, including murder. Members typically follow a charismatic leader who may be viewed as having godlike powers, even being the reincarnation of an important religious figure. The leader and his/her lieutenants commonly enforce loyalty by severe discipline and by physically preventing members from leaving the group. 7. Criminal terrorism. Sometimes terrorist groups become involved in common law crimes, such as drug dealing and kidnapping, even selling nuclear materials. According to terrorism expert Chris Dishman, these illegal activities may on occasion become so profitable that they replace the group's original focus. The variety of terror groups. Revolutionary terrorists use violence to frighten those in power and their supporters in order to replace the existing government with a regime that holds acceptable political or religious views. Political terrorists. Political terrorism is directed at people or groups who oppose the terrorists' political ideology or whom the terrorists define as outsiders who must be destroyed. Eco-terrorism. Political terror groups involved in violent actions to protect the environment. Nationalist terrorism. Groups whose actions promote the interests of a minority ethnic or religious group that has been persecuted under majority rule and or wishes to carve out its own independent homeland. Retributive terrorism. Groups that use violence as a method of influence, persuasion, or intimidation in order to achieve a particular aim or objective. State-sponsored terrorism. Carried out by a repressive government regime in order to force its citizens into obedience, oppress minorities, and stifle political dissent. Cult terrorism. Cults whose leaders demand that followers prove their loyalty through violence or intimidation. Criminal terrorism. Terrorist groups that become involved in common law crimes such as drug dealing and kidnapping, even selling nuclear materials.